Well, in a shocking turn of events, Magic Legends announced today that it'll be closing its servers on October 31st, effectively ending production on the game. Perhaps even more shocking is the fact that they'll be refunding all money spent by players in their cash shop, which means if you're like me and you spent several $100s trying to get the Dimir Assassin, then that money will be refunded to you. I've been keeping up with the game on Reddit and on the official forums for the past several months, even though I haven't been playing the game, just sort of following what players have been saying, and a lot of people have been making comments about how the game is dead and there hasn't been too many people playing, and if you look at the comment history, people have only been posting about once a day on Reddit, or there have been like 1 or 2 new posts a day, so it's been pretty mild, to say the least. But it's still sort of shocking that the game itself is seriously closing before coming out of beta. I wouldn't be surprised if this game didn't do very well, based on what's been happening with the game, and then it was kind of on life support for several years, and then it got announced it was shutting down. But it's very, very uncommon for a game to get shut down before it even leaves the beta stages. So let's get into some of the reasons why this game probably shut down abruptly. I think the most obvious to most people who have played this game is that there were some serious issues with this game that would probably take a year or two at least to figure out in terms of development. And part of that is because it doesn't seem like development is particularly fast on this game. If you remember when this game was first announced, it was heralded as an MMO, and immediately when I heard that there was going to be a Magic the Gathering MMO, I thought of something maybe like Elder Scrolls Online in terms of presentation, only with Magic the Gathering themes and spells and characters, and I got super excited. But slowly over time, we realized that this was more akin to an ARPG, playing something more like a hack and slash from the isometric point of view. So that was disappointing. And then expectations readjusted, and everything was kind of downhill from there. What's really disappointing about this game is that there's a lot of potential here for something greater that never materialized and probably will never materialize now because of this happenstance. And we'll probably never see another Magic ARPG. I just feel like that's something that's probably not going to happen. And it's really, really sad. Being a huge fan of Magic the Gathering, this was obviously something I was very excited for. But also, probably more critical than, players who are not familiar with Magic the Gathering universe, because I had such high expectations. Because Magic the Gathering is probably one of my favorite games of all time. So the biggest issue I want to talk about with this game is content. A lot of people complain about the cash shop itself, and that's a complaint, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I think arguably the biggest problem with this game is the lack of content. There is simply not enough to do in this game. You can get through the majority of the content in, a couple of days, and then you have nothing to do but repeat the things that you did over and over. And the quality of that content was not particularly great to begin with. The game has a story, but it's not very well done. Some of the characters in the game are quite iconic, and they're not very well voice acted. So all in all, the content that you do have isn't very well done, and there is just not enough of it to go around. Coupled with the fact that the game has about 180 or so spells, this sounds like a good number of spells until you realize that you play the vast majority of the game with about half of them, which is about 90 spells, and a deck has 12 spells. And there are 6 colors. 6 colors times 12 is 72 cards. This basically gives you almost no options for probably the first 10 to 20 hours, maybe 30 or 40 hours of the game in terms of what cards you can add to your deck. A huge part of Magic the Gathering is deck building, and though this game has very good deck building, the amount of cards you get to choose from in terms of what you can make in your deck is very, very limited, and the game punishes you for this as well. Your character's power is tied directly to the spell level of the spells that you're using in the game, and since every time you change these up, probably those spells are low level, this means that if you're going from running like high level content to like hard or harder difficulty, you have to drop the difficulty back down or you simply die, enemies hit you too hard. So they've actually, sort of punished you for experimenting with other decks, which is just kind of anti the way Magic the Gathering should be. It should reward you for experimenting other decks, and it should encourage experimentation, because that's such a huge part. Just looking over the Magic the Gathering cards, very, very few of them are actual Magic the Gathering cards from the game. A lot of them are inspired by cards from the game, but very, very few are actual games in Magic the Gathering. This makes me wonder if Cryptic didn't have a limited license for Magic the Gathering and could only make certain cards or a certain amount of cards from the actual game, and if whether or not that actually hampered the production of the game, because this game actually needs about 3 or 4 times the cards at launch before it adds more. And part of the problem with that could be the fact that they are having trouble coming up with cards because they're just not allowed to create certain cards or use certain cards. I don't know if that's a thing, but if you look at Solasta recently, this is another game that had a limited license from Wizards of the Coast compared to Baldur's Gate 3, and they had to only use certain classes or certain subclasses and certain races, rather. So they couldn't use everything, but they could use some things and then create their own, and they did a very good job at that. But this could be something that Cryptic has been struggling with. The next thing I want to talk about that really hurt this game is the caps. Players have been complaining about the caps of this game since its inception, and very, very little has been done to rectify this issue. It's very well known that players do not like the fact that you can only make a certain amount of progress in a week or a day with their character, and then they feel like that progress is hampered. You can only accumulate so much of one resource or another resource, plane or mana or whatever being a huge one of those points. But this has been made vocal, it's been made known, and very little to date has been done about this. It almost felt like, Cryptic refused to bend or change their business model, or maybe weren't allowed to, I don't know. And that really hurt the game, because there's nothing worse than actually enjoying a game, even with its flaws, and then being prevented from playing or progressing in that game. And that just compounded the problem, in my opinion. Beyond that, it's a bit bizarre to have a cash shop in a game that's in beta. I think this left a really, really bad taste in people's mouth, because not only did they change the battle pass to include more things, they've changed what's in packs, the chances of getting drops from packs since people have spent money. They didn't disclose, or I don't know if they've ever disclosed, the chances of getting things. I think people have deduced this in time. People are realizing that it's almost impossible to get the Dearmere Assassin in packs. Myself learned that the hard way, spending several $100s. And it left a really, really sour taste in your mouth. Anytime you realize that you had, even spending $250, you still had a 50-50 chance of getting an item or so. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. And beyond that, considering the amount of patches that this game needs to get where it needs to be in a very, very good place to be considered a good game, it needs a lot of work. You're selling things in this game for absurd prices for a game that is barely functional, that has content and is fun to play for a very small amount of time. But the amount of money that you pay in the store, maybe without even realizing it, is far beyond what you get back. I feel like that was just, probably the dagger in the heart there that probably ended, a lot of people's hopes for this game, and probably put a lot of people off the game that probably would have stuck out some of the other issues to see where it ended up. In addition, this doesn't even take into consideration external factors like the fact that Diablo 2 Resurrected is now announced to be coming out at the end of September. This is arguably around this time frame, is arguably when this game would have come out of beta and would have come out on consoles. And one of the biggest selling points of this game, if you can call it a selling point because the game's free, is that it wouldn't have had a ton of competition on console. Even though the game hasn't been so successful on PC, it probably would have been more successful on console, even in its current state, arguably, just because there is not that many alternatives on console. There's Path of Exile, and I struggle to think of another game in this same genre that, has as much production as these two games. So it would have been competing against Path of Exile, which it may have won some, may have lost some against that game for sure. But now with, Diablo 2 Resurrected coming out on console as well, that's going to kill a lot of, the traffic to this game, or the amount of people playing, because they'll simply go play Diablo 2. Anyway, it was quite surprising to see that the game was being canceled, because this is a huge loss for both Wizards of the Coast and Cryptic. And that's a lot of money down the drain, perfect world. And you don't normally see people just throw money away like that. Particularly alluding to the refunds here. I mean, that means that the whole game they developed, all the time spent working on this game, they made $0. So that is a huge, millions and millions of dollars down the drain. And it makes me wonder, how these companies are going to survive that, particularly during COVID, etc. And, what's next for these companies? So what do you guys think? What do you like about Magic Legends? What do you dislike? Are you surprised that the game shut down? Are you surprised, not surprised that it shut down, but you're surprised that it happened so quickly? What do you think's next for Magic? Do you think they'll try another ARPG down the road? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.